You about that for a second. First of all, how many of you are in an organization where there may be some trust issues between various adults in the school? Anybody have any of that? I was going to say, well, you're straight out. This is New York after all. Because the fact is, I was thinking that a whole lot of you would be timid about that, and I was going to say, well, if you look around the room before you raise your hand, there's an issue, trust issue. You know, there's so many challenges in terms of trust. I mean, how many of you have actually been asked to be on a team where you come up with the answer to a gripping problem? Let's say it's how do you teach second language learners English, or, you know, which program you're going to use, or which field trip you're going to take. And at the end of the committee meeting, you come up with the answer and the principal says, that's the wrong answer. In other words, the answer was already predetermined before you were asked to work on it. Anybody have that experience? That violates trust. There are lots of things that do. But here's the important fact for everybody to know, first of all, is that Schneider proved after studying schools for 5 years in Chicago longitudinally, if you have no trust, you have virtually no chance of student gains. And I'm talking about trust among the adults in the building, not between the adults and the students, that too. But it all starts with the adults. And a corollary to that is that if the adults are learning, the kids are learning. So these are important things to know, that we are modeling what's going on with the kids. It's not that the kids all of a sudden stop trusting each other, it's that it comes from the top. So with that in mind, there are 4 components. I want to kind of quickly define what trust involves. This is all obviously an overview, but you know, Schneider, we're talking about, first of all, respect. That means on the work front, that you have respect for one another and how you behave and what you expect from one another. The second thing is competence. In other words, if I give you something to do, I believe that you can do it and you're going to deliver. So competence is important. Without that, you don't trust that you can get things done. The third thing is personal regard. So if my car goes off a cliff in the morning and I drag myself up the mountain and I call in for work and I say, oh, my car just went off a cliff, and they go, great, when can you be here? That's not personal regard. And the fourth one has to do with alignment, and this is very important from a leadership standpoint. And teachers, you're all leaders for all of your kids, and you're probably leaders on informal ways in the building and informal ones, hopefully. So especially for leaders, alignment of words, actions, and intentions. So if you do something and you say, you know, I'm going to start this new program, and people think that it's just because you're trying to please the superintendent to get a raise, it's not going to go over very well. The obstacles to trust are many, many, many. I'm going to give you one example again on the kid level, but then we'll translate it to adults because this all applies. So I used to teach a class. All the kids would come in and I'd try to shake all their hands and do different high signs for them. You know, if you have different codes for different kids, they love it, right? Some kids like this, and some like, you know, that, and some like this, and some like, you know, boom, boom, boom. You know, so whatever it is, you personalize it, it's even better. So one kid, Tony, had his own personal thing, which was to never even acknowledge me. He'd just look at me and, you know, look down, or look away, or like, so eventually, after a couple months, I pulled my hand away just to see what would happen. I'm shaking everyone's hand, I pull my hand away. He goes, man, why you do me like that? I go, Tony, why I do you like what? He goes, why you pull your hand away like that? I said, Tony, I had my hand out for 2 months. You didn't want to shake it. He goes, yeah, but I didn't think you was going to give up on me like that. Now, it's funny, but it's also sad, right? Because it's true. The fact is that it's the last thing he wants and the first thing that every adult has done. So he needs special intervention, special attention, and so does some of your staff, because you got a lot of walking wounded that have grown up like Tony have, and they're on your staff. So that's one of the many, many obstacles. We're going to get to some strategies in a minute. How many of you have data walls? Can I see that? Just a few? Okay. How many of you have walkthroughs in your classroom? Okay. Let me just talk with you about what this looks like when trust is in place on data walls. So not that we advocate it, but this has sprung up in different places in the country enough so that I'm seeing that this is a natural outgrowth in many ways to trust, is that these data walls that I've seen have the teacher's name and the student's name associated with the teacher and the grades that they're getting all on the wall. They chose to do that. That's some serious trust, right? They're making it public because they want to help each other to improve. And the students don't think it's a problem either. It's not a stigma. It's actually an opportunity to advance things so that additional resources, time, support go into those areas where they're needed. That's a serious statement on trust. In terms of deprivatization, you know, one of our districts in Williamston, we actually did 8 districts outside of Ingham. Williamston Middle School, they've deprivatized to the part, and we're going to get to how they did that in a minute, that people are coming through the room on a regular basis. They decided that they wanted to have reading and writing across the curriculum, and they used various subject area teachers to develop that curriculum. And now whenever they want to do like a graphic demonstration using, you know, one of the techniques in this rubric they developed, people will get an email. We're about to use a graphic organizer that we all developed. You want to come into my room? See it. And people will sign up to go and look in their room. Someone from central office will come and cover the teaching post, or from the building administration. So that's the level of collaboration and trust that we're seeing in these districts. Here's some strategies that I've seen used across the country. Now, remember, I'm just the messenger. You know, we've got a book out. 200,000 people read the first edition, so the second book is out now. And what we did was get those stories. What's working? How's it working? Here's one of the things that works: listening. New leaders come in and they often say, I'm in charge now, here's what we're going to do. Boy, is that the beginning of the end, right? And if they think that they're in charge of a 2,000-person high school, they're delusional, right? Because there's no one principal that's in charge of all that. It better be a team. Listening. The second thing that we've seen is over-communicating, because people start to fill in the voids of communication with their own fears. So if people aren't saying really clearly and hearing back what they said, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we're doing this initiative. This is the initiative we're doing. This is your role in the initiative. This is how it's going to have an impact for our kids. If they're not communicating those things clearly, people just start to fill it in with their own gossip, and it becomes problematic. Another thing is confronting inappropriate behaviors. We think that building trust means having friends. It doesn't necessarily. It means a lot of things, and one of them is when there are problems that everybody agreed shouldn't be happening. For example, everybody agrees you're going to go to the meeting on time, and we're going to have a meeting in this manner, and we're not going to do sidebars, and you know, we have protocols for a good meeting. The leaders need to confront inappropriate behaviors, because if they don't, the first thing that happens is that everybody else thinks that they can do the same thing. And the second thing that happens is that they either think that the leader's out of touch, or that, you know, it really doesn't count. Everything that we agreed to doesn't count. So the consensus has to count, because we, the people, created that consensus. So confronting behaviors in a respectful way. I'm not saying, you know, heavy-handed. I'm saying that you create ways, and we have means of conversing that are really effective. And creating fail-free zones, fail-safe zones. So in other words, if you're going to do a new initiative and you get piloted, you know, people willing to pilot it, that's not something you want to evaluate them on, right? You want to create these zones where, listen, we're going to support you, you're going to do the best you can, there's no failure. What there is success and learning and eventual success if you had initial failures. Engaging staff first on a voluntary basis. So in that Middleston High School that I mentioned, Williamston Middle School that I mentioned before, all of those things that they did for creating reading and writing across the curriculum started with volunteers. All of the walkthroughs started with volunteers, and you know what? They stopped calling it walkthroughs. They called it peer-to-peer, because they didn't want there to be any pressure of being evaluated. Again, fail-safe zones. They wanted people to just get in there, see a little something, and write a positive email after that to the person who taught the class, and eventually expand that out. And now it's to the point where there's so much trust that everybody's in everybody else's classroom learning all the time. So they started on voluntary basis, very important. And as I said, reframe, rename the activity, so it's not peer evaluation or peer review or walkthrough. It is peer-to-peer. The work that we've been doing has been not only about the strategies for reaching every child, but also how to create a culture where it's less likely that you're going to have to go overboard and become a superhero teacher, because the culture of the school is reaching all the kids. So that's what I wanted to talk with you about today, is how to create that kind of high-performing culture. Are you in the right spot? Yeah? Okay. Is that okay with you? All right, beautiful. And what I'd like to ask is that, you've been so interactive so far, and if what I propose as the agenda, which was finalized recently, as I mentioned before, is not working for you, then let me know, because I'd rather lose the agenda than lose you. And I tell teachers the same thing: lose the curriculum, don't lose the kids, right? Because, there's so much emphasis on coverage. We have to cover all these materials. We have to get to the Second World War by Friday, right? And you cover it all because you got No Child Left Untested over your head, right? But no one's there with you when you look behind you. And the same thing goes for leaders. That's why I said the first thing is engagement. Because if you want the leaders to be involved, and if you want the teachers to be leaders and to be with you, then you have to work on that angle of it, or else you just cover things and you lose people. You get things, you don't get people. And we need the people on board. So the second thing is that teachers, to build collective capacity, they engage in collaborative activity around that stated purpose. And there's a lot I can say about collaboration, but there's not a lot I can say in collaboration in 3 more minutes or 5 more minutes. So let's just say that they collaborate really effectively. But I'll say one thing: one of the most basic types of collaboration that we see that isn't effective is called contrived collegiality. That's where all the people get together and they say, yeah, we collaborate. We went out for a beer last night. I mean, we're very collaborative. But they're not drilling down to the specifics of this kind of collaboration where I say, I noticed that you did better on quadratic equations than I did with your students. Can you watch me teach and give me feedback? Can I watch you teach? So that is collaboration that's data-based. It drills down to the individual teacher, the individual student, the type of problem that we're having, and it goes on outside of the classroom. Outside of the meeting and into the classroom. So that's a collaborative piece. And then finally, what we do is we start to build collective responsibility, because when people feel like there's trust and there's capacity, that is, that they can do their job and that others will do their job, they can start to build some collective commitment to create